Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about those work moments where a big emotion shows up and it just kind of takes over your brain and stops everything working. Some people call this like emotional hijacks. Some people say, oh, my brain just got completely scrambled and I just wasn't able to think straight or think clearly. And the problem with these moments, well, for my clients, there are many problems with these moments. One of them is that when we feel these big emotions, whether that's panic or total fear or terror or just such high anxiety, we can't really do the thing we're trying to do very easily because it kind of takes your brain offline. So it makes the thing that you're trying to do really, really difficult. It also, I think, gives you a kind of anticipatory anxiety about this thing happening again. So in the work that I do with people, they might become really, really concerned that this thing's going to happen, where they just freak out and their brain really feels like it's gone offline, which in turn just heightens the emotion and heightens the anxiety and the worry, thinking, oh God, this thing might happen again. And what I also notice it does is it means that you kind of really lose perspective on whatever it is you're actually trying to do. And it becomes this massive problem, this huge like deal because of the emotion around it. So you no longer think, I'm just having a conversation with some people in a room, which, let's face it, that's what a meeting actually is. It becomes this huge monster almost in your mind, and that means that you lose all perspective. And that perspective loss also relates to the amount of time in your workday that these kinds of moments are actually happening. So people will tell me about these different work moments where their brain might go offline and it's just such heightened emotion that they're really struggling. And when we actually get down to it and I say to them, you know, how much of your workday is this? It might be like 2%, 5%, like it's actually usually quite small. But because of the fear and the anticipation and the dread about these moments, it becomes all encompassing in somebody's mind, and it might be all encompassing in your mind. So it all looks really frightening and really dire. And for a lot of the people I work with, it doesn't matter how many times they go and do that thing, it doesn't seem to get any better, it just seems to keep happening. So today I'm going to give you 3 real client examples, anonymized and shared with client permission, of before and after. And I want to share these with you because I want you to know that there can be a before and an after. So if you're experiencing these kinds of moments at work and these huge emotions just seem to be hijacking you and getting in the way and not allowing you to do the things that you need to do, or at least not allow you to do them in the way that you want to do them, there is hope. And to be honest, I doubt that these 3 clients really thought that there was much hope when they started, but they were at least brave enough to take a chance and give it a go. So these 3 examples are, everyday things in terms of work. The first one's about public speaking at a podium. The second one is about being challenged in a meeting. And the third one is worrying about a quote unquote big meeting. Day-to-day moments. These are the things that you might have to deal with. But these are the moments where we want to feel confident. And if these huge emotions are taking over, it's very difficult for us to feel confident. So the first one is around public speaking. And I shared this with the people who are on my email this week. So the before, so we're going to do a before and an after. The before was my client's emotions were so loud and so big that her words, she just freaked out. And for her, what that meant was she was like a rabbit in the headlights. unable to think clearly, unable to respond to people in the way that she wanted. If any tiny thing happened that threw her off the script or what she prepared, she wasn't able to think on her feet. She had a lot of physical symptoms, like her heart was jumping out of her chest, hands would be sweating. And this didn't just happen in the moments before, although it ramped up in the moments before. She would feel something like that when she thought about getting up to the podium and speaking in the days and weeks beforehand. So that was her before. Now, we've done the work. She's done the work, should I say. Now she has, her words again, manageable nerves only. And the last time she stood at the podium, her report back was, and I quote, "It wasn't that much of a big deal. I was just talking about work while some people listened." Notice the difference. Remember I said that when those emotions are so big and it's so frightening, you don't have perspective like that. You can't see the reality of the situation that actually you are just stood at a podium talking about some work while some people listen. That's literally what you're doing, but that is not how she would have described it before. Before she described it as a terrifying performance. And now she describes it as more of a conversation. And the only thing that's actually changed, she still gets up, she still speaks about her work. It's the same thing that she's doing, exactly the same thing. The only thing we've done is turn down the emotion. We've dialed back the freak out to some manageable nerves only. And what a difference. Now she just thinks it's not that much of a big deal and I'm just talking to some people about work while they listen. And this is not an unusual example. So this is work I do with clients fairly frequently. And this is great, right? Because this is part of her job. This is something that she has to do. She likes her job. She wants to be able to get up there and do it. It's actually not a massive part of her job, but it's enough that when she felt totally taken out by these big emotions, it was just too much. So if that's you, and you have to stand up at a podium with emotions like her so loud that you would just freak out, know that you can get to a stage where you've got some manageable nerves only, and standing at the podium is not that much of a big deal. If she can do it, you can do it. Here's my next example, and this is a different client, and this is about getting challenged in a meeting. So maybe like you and like a lot of people, your ideas, your views, your work is going to come under scrutiny sometimes. The more senior you get, the more I think this happens. And this wasn't a setting where someone was being really unfairly challenged or belittled or shouted down. That wasn't what was happening. But there was robust challenge in this organisation and within this team. Her before was that in that situation, in that setting, panic used to rush in. That was how she described it. If she thought that there was a chance that she was going to get challenged or that somebody might come back and start debating one of the points she'd made or about the work that her team had done, as she described it, panic used to rush in. And as she said, it created this urge for her to just shrink and back down immediately. And when she came to me, she said, I don't want this to be happening. I want to be able to, her words, stay online. And what that meant to her was stay listening, stay open, stay curious, stay in the conversation. And if necessary, argue my point as robustly as everyone else is going to argue theirs. So her after is that she can now, her words, stay online. And she said, so I can keep responding calmly and professionally, even if things get a bit heated. And we had a chat about what that actually means for her, that change. Now that panic response has gone and she doesn't have that urge to shrink down and back down. I said, what happens? What changes? And she said, well, for one, I can actually listen to the points that people are making because sometimes they're making good points and sometimes their challenge means that something gets refined or that we get to think through a risk before we go ahead. So I've actually noticed that more often than not, the challenge is actually a good thing. And when I'm not panicking, I can see it like that. And it means that I can think, maybe this is a good point and I can use it. Amazing. She said it also means that if I don't agree with somebody, I'm going to tell them I don't agree with them. I'm going to tell them why, and I'm going to explain the position. Again, great. And all of that was, in theory, possible for her before, but it wasn't possible while this panic was rushing in and it was creating that urge to shrink down and back down immediately. In that setting, her before was that she just couldn't stay online, have the conversations that she needed to have, and do what she needed to do, which was expected of her in her role. Now we have removed that panic response. There's no urge to shrink or back down. She just stays at the table and has the conversation. And I love this for her because she's good at what she does. And no one needs that kind of panic hijacking them, especially when it's really important that they can stay online and do the thing that they're trying to do. So well done her. She did the work and it worked. My third example is worrying about a quote unquote big meeting. So this client said these were big meetings. And to give you the context, the big meetings were with more senior people and more people who she wasn't familiar with necessarily. If she was familiar with everyone, she kind of felt okay. But it was when she didn't know people as well, or people were unfamiliar and senior. This was her before. Feeling sick beforehand, over preparing to the nth degree, feeling stressed throughout, struggling to listen during the meeting because she was in her own head thinking, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? How am I going to contribute? Then she said, getting through it, then she would replay each thing she'd said, quote unquote, wrong afterwards. And these meetings were happening fairly frequently. So she'd have to feel sick beforehand, stressed throughout, and then replay each thing she'd said, quote unquote, wrong afterwards. She described a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of stressed feeling. And she said, I just want to be able to handle it because it's part of my job. So now her after is that she is preparing. She said, I am feeling ready. I'm handling the meeting well. And then I'm moving on with my day. And it was funny because she said, do you know what? When I asked her about the last one, she said, do you know what? I actually didn't do that thing afterwards where I sort of pick apart every thing I said in the meeting. I actually didn't do that afterwards. And she hadn't even noticed that she'd stopped doing it. But great thing that she'd stopped doing it, because that was meaning that she had an emotional hangover after that meeting that was clouding the rest of her day, where she wouldn't be very productive. Now, she said, I can move on with my day. So if you're similar and you're worrying about big meetings or things that are similar to this, you're noticing it beforehand, you're noticing it during, and you're noticing it afterwards, it doesn't have to feel like that forever. You can get to a stage where you're preparing, you're ready, you handle it, and then you move on. Like you do with loads of other meetings, I'm sure, that don't feel as big. And we didn't change anything, really. The only thing we changed was we turned down the anxiety. We turned down the worry. The rest of the scenario was actually exactly the same. She still prepped. She still went to the meeting. But without all that heightened emotion, she could prep for it, do it, over with, and get on with the day. Brilliant. So that's just 3 examples of normal workday moments where emotions might be rolling around crashing like waves and taking you out of feeling capable, feeling competent, feeling confident, taking you out of being able to listen, being able to think, being able to respond, and just taking you into this kind of tunnel of terror. We don't need you in that tunnel at work. Work is hard enough already. But if you find yourself in moments like that, feeling emotions that are so high and so heightened that it's just taking you out, know that you're not alone, because these examples, thank you to my clients, people always say, yeah, I'm happy for you to share it anonymously if it'll help someone else. And I always say to them, it will help someone else. It definitely will help someone else, probably more than one person. So with thanks to them, I hope that you can see that when you can reduce the emotion, and you can reduce the emotion in these moments, you can then get on with your job, show up like the professional that you are. And you can also put this thing into perspective, because for most people, this isn't all day, every day they're doing this. It's just occasionally. It might be once a day, might be twice a week, it might be twice a month. And when you don't feel those big emotions. You're able to see that in the perspective of everything else that you do and do really well. And it just becomes a part of your job and it becomes normal. So maybe you don't think, oh, yeah, I love these things. Maybe you do. But most of my clients don't want to get to that stage. They just want to get to the stage of thinking, well, yeah, this is just a normal part of my job. So I just show up and do it like I do every part of my job. For most of them, it's not like they're trying to be, I'm trying to be like the best presenter in the world and I'm trying to be like the hot shot in all these meetings. They just want to be like, yeah, I just want to go in there and do my bloody job because that's what I'm getting paid to do. And I just want to do it without all the stress and the anxiety and the worry, please, if that's possible. And what I hope you can see through these examples is that is possible. If it's possible for them, it's possible for you. And I want you to think about what it would be like if you could turn down the emotions in all of those settings where they currently might be looming large. What would it be like if you could just get up there and feel okay? What would it be like if you could sit in that meeting and it was just a meeting like any other meeting? What would it be like if you could be challenged and just see that as part of the course? Maybe work would be a bit easier. Maybe it would be a bit more enjoyable. Maybe it would be a bit less exhausting. So I hope these examples have given you some hope. I've been enjoying taking people behind the scenes recently and showing them some of the work that gets done in the privacy of coaching sessions. And if you want to reduce the emotions at work, I can help. Head to the link in the show notes and book a call. I'm happy to chat with you and tell you whether or not I think I can help you. All right. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.